Time now for the Sunday Talk. Tonight, the politics of media infatuation. It was a big week for Justin Trudeau and the international press, who just can't seem to get enough. The world is talking, but has the media been too swept up?
What's your name?
This week, it was a stop at New York's famed Gleason's Gym. The cover of the Men's Style Bible. And Time's list of the world's 100 most influential people. Last week,
very simply, normal computers work by...
It was this almost too perfect media moment.
No, don't interrupt me. What quantum states allow for is much more complex information to be encoded into a single bit.
Since he was elected, Trudeau has mastered the art of going viral.
He is going to be grown up to be a feminist just like Dad.
But while the media is lapping it up and he makes headlines around the world, the opposition has been calling him out.
The Prime Minister should stop using his cell phone for selfies. The surplus is real, whether the Liberals want to admit it or not. And frankly, it shouldn't take an expert in quantum computing to recognize it.
Critical stories are getting covered.
The Liberal promise to beat the deficit now lies in ruins.
Canada has sold about 3,000 light armored vehicles to the Saudis.
The question is anyone listening? I'm joined by our panelists. Tonight, Supriya Dwivedi is a government relations consultant and commentator. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief at Walrus Magazine. And Paul Wells is the political editor of Maclean's Magazine. So you're not the journalist here, really, so I'm going to start with you. Has the media been too swept up in all of this to the detriment of ignoring stories that really matter?
No, I don't think so. And we saw it right there in your coverage. There's lots of headlines that are critical of Trudeau and his government, whether it's the Saudi arms deal, whether it's fundraising by the Justice Minister, or whether it's he's not going to the emergency Ottawa-Wapiskat debate. There has been coverage of all of these issues, and I think it's really unfair for those to criticize the media. The reality is that I don't think the public interest is necessarily there in getting into how Canada deals in terms of arms deals, and we're more interested in viral hits about quantum computing. But I don't think that's the media to blame. I think that's the public. That's just where the interest lies.
But isn't that part of our job, to talk to people about things that really matter?
Part of our job is to tell people this is what you should be interested in. If you're an intelligent person who wants to be well informed, this is the sort of thing that you should be interested in. And especially if it's a newspaper, the old-fashioned print edition, you put it on the front page, above the fold, it's like, this is what you should be talking about. And the Saudi arms deal is a perfect example. Complicated issue, good arguments on both sides, war on terrorism, Canadian export industry.
So are we not covering enough of that?
Well, as I say, it was on the front pages, and people just didn't seem to be that interested in the issue. I'm only one man. I can't make 35 million Canadians interested in a media issue.
Paul, you measure this stuff. A lot of media outlets do.
Yeah.
Is it our fault or the people's fault?
Well, so the cover of Maclean's this week is about the national market in still illegal marijuana. My column is about a new book about the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 1988. We've got a really compelling piece that talks to a counselor to people who are going to go through assisted dying. And so complex, and go buy Maclean's. But we also measure clicks on our website. And the top stories on our website this week was Trudeau boxing, Trudeau and quantum physics, and a video that we shot that lasts about 30 seconds of Trudeau reciting some Shakespeare for the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare Day. So we put out a broad and complex package of editorial offers, and our readers skip right by it. And a lot of the readers who are going to the Trudeau looking buff stuff are from outside Canada, not even particularly fully aware of what Maclean's magazine is, but this guy is hot and they're off they go,
So how much are we influenced, we, the traditional media, by clickbait, by what happens in social media?
We are still making our own editorial choices. In a lot of cases, we're trying to cover the depth and complexity of things. But we also, shoot him answering funny questions for 60 seconds or reciting Shakespeare, and that's the stuff that goes to the top. We didn't put it to the top. Frankly, I spent 8 days in Brussels covering terrorism, and no one read that, They want to take a look at the Canadian Prime Minister.
So how much are we influenced then, John, by social media, by this clickbait?
Well, I think social media is there as a backstop for when we're not interested in other things. And one thing that frustrates us in the media is there's a waxing and waning to when people are interested in substantive issues. At election time, you can sometimes get people interested in C-51 is a good example. There was a huge interest in C-51, governing the security powers that the government had. And, you'd go to people's houses with politicians and they would ask questions about it.
Not a lot of debate about that lately.
And then as soon as Trudeau got elected, it was like, oh, Trudeau's there, we can trust him, it doesn't matter what the legislation actually says, and everybody stopped talking about C-51. So it became an issue of trust, and the underlying issue, just people, as Paul said, would rather just see videos of him looking buff.
So there's got to be a limit, though, somewhere, Supriya, right? Where people are going to say, okay, enough of the cameras following you everywhere. Are we anywhere near that?
Yeah, and I think we saw a little bit of it in the last couple of weeks with Gawker and Jezebel both running headlines suggesting that Justin Trudeau was a phony because of his quantum computing answer. I do think that there is going to reach some sort of collective tipping point in which people are generally going to be a little bit, I guess, sick of the overexposure, if you will, of our Prime Minister. I don't think we're there yet, but I think if it will happen, it'll have to come from the international press just because of the way the international press has been covering him, because the Canadian press has done a very good job of being critical of Trudeau and his government thus far, I believe.
Is that fair? I mean, should we be worried about where the coverage is?
No, I don't think so. This is a government that we know has a majority. The first government in a long time that comes to office with a majority, and they've implemented a lot of processes that will lead to long-throw major reforms: electoral reform, pot legalization, reconciliation with First Nations, and on and on and on. It's dumb to judge how well that's gone now when these are all 3- and 4-year processes. We'll get back to how well they've done when they've done the stuff. Just as in June of 2006, nobody was talking about chaos in Stephen Harper's Prime Minister's office. It makes sense to sort of give them some rope and follow the evolution as it goes along. Meanwhile, the Globe has had Saudi arms sales on the front page most days for the last couple months. Meanwhile, there was a lot of close coverage of whether they were going to meet their refugee targets, of the fact that they didn't meet the refugee targets on time, and then follow up when they did meet the refugee targets a few weeks later.
Well, actually, when Paul's talking about long throw projects, you could even talk about infrastructure investment, which arguably is a generational project. My view would be that this will end, the honeymoon period will end for Trudeau when there is a loss of trust, because every government has an episode where there's a loss of trust. It hasn't happened with Trudeau yet, but every government has its scandals. Even Ronald Reagan, who went in with so much capital, he had Iran-Contra. I don't know if Trudeau will have his equivalent of Iran-Contra, but when that comes, people will start scrutinizing him more and we'll get less of the social media stuff.
Back to celebrities. Leonardo DiCaprio gave a big presentation to the United Nations this week. Justin Trudeau was there. It wasn't just boxing. I just want the idea of celebrities with influence, or an influential prime minister who is also a celebrity. I mean, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Do we only pay attention when there's a celebrity or someone who looks like one speaking?
I mean, I think it definitely helps, but I don't think it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just a thing. And I think the fact that our Prime Minister does have that sort of international cachet and gravitas about him, and that, people do want to pay attention when he says he's a feminist, I think is a good thing. And to be quite honest, there hasn't really been a whole large swath of male politicians coming through and claiming their feminist credentials. So to me, it's a nice and happy welcome to change.
Leonardo DiCaprio is the world leader, Paul?
15 years ago, it would have been Angelina Jolie. 50 years ago, it would have been Catherine or Audrey Hepburn. These things are kind of eternal, and they are eternally sideshows to the real business of statecraft. Tomorrow, Barack Obama is going to be meeting with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, and the UK. Still a member of the European Union. And that's going to be way more important, way more consequential than whatever Leo DiCaprio said. But Leo DiCaprio is welcome to come and join the conversation, just as I hope all kinds of people are.
I don't really care what Leonardo DiCaprio
He's welcome to come and join the conversation.
That's the man-by-dog aspect of it. That's the man-by-dog aspect of it. We're used to celebrities trying to get into politics. What's weird about Trudeau is that he's a politician who actually has the star power of a celebrity. And that's a really weird thing. If you look at, say, Ted Cruz or Bernie Sanders, that's kind of what politicians look like to us, usually. Kasich. Rubio was the exception because he was so good looking. But Trudeau is, I mean, it's odd. It's just strange that a person has that much charisma. And I think that's why the world is so fascinated with it.
So is this maybe a generational thing that Justin Trudeau was very comfortable on camera?
But not everybody in his generation is that good looking. Like, I mean, even for his generation.
So it's all just about that?
I think he's a very telegenic person, but there's some authenticity to it. Supriya was talking about his feminism. It happened 25 years ago at McGill University. He was there when they started the sexual assault prevention team, and he was there on the ground floor. So there is authenticity to it when he says, I've been an environmentalist all my life, I've been a feminist. Obviously, he's extremely comfortable with technology. So aside from the charisma and being telegenic, he does have these attributes which makes him extremely attractive to modern, younger people.
Right, and I do think the one thing that Justin Trudeau has that other, prime ministers certainly haven't is knowing new technology. So getting social media, understanding that being referred to as, somebody who likes selfies isn't necessarily a bad thing, that the Kardashianization of politics isn't a bad thing. It's just the reality and where it's going with 24/7 coverage and needing, to up your Twitter followers as much as you would in terms of a Maclean's piece being read.
Well, there is a real divide here, though, I would think, generationally, that, people who haven't grown up in that think that it's shallow, or it's people wanting to look at themselves all the time.
Yeah. So
is it a sign of modernity, or is it a sign of being shallow and egocentric?
If you Google Stephen Harper selfies, you see quite a large number of voters who took selfies with Stephen Harper in the last few years before he lost the election. Not as many as Justin Trudeau, because there was a very rigorous selection process for determining who got anywhere close to Stephen Harper. Whereas when Trudeau walked into the hotel in Kananaskis today on the eve of the cabinet retreat that they're going to have there, or regular folks were just coming right up to him and taking selfies. Angela Merkel takes selfies, Putin takes selfies. The Mexican president sends pictures of selfies that voters have taken to the press every week in Mexico to try and burnish his credentials as a man of the people. It's not generational. It's 2016. If Stephen Harper were prime minister today, there'd be more selfies than there were when he began being prime minister, because when he was first elected, the iPhone hadn't been invented yet.
I still had a flip phone back then that I don't even think took proper pictures.
Yeah, they were very grainy.
Yeah.
But it's funny, here we are, he went to the UN, and we're all talking about him at the boxing gym. Is that good?
It's good if you're desperately looking for a talking point, and you're...
Well, maybe we
No,
are.
no, I'm talking about Rona Ambrose. Rona Ambrose, we saw in the setup pack, her getting up in question period, and you've got, huge approval ratings for Trudeau. What's the only thing you're going to hang your attack on? Oh, he's shallow, he's vain, he's taking pictures with celebrities.
They already tried that, though. Like, that was
they got
essentially
nothing
the
else.
entire
They got
campaign.
nothing.
Yeah.
This is their problem right now.
Well,
it's an attack line.
As you say, it may not last forever, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm glad that everyone's been so supportive of the media in entirety. Thank you so much.